a small town in Indiana where everyone knows everyone, where in the evenings the streets smell of freshly cut grass, and in the mornings you can hear the neighbors starting up their old pickup trucks to go to work. Brendan Kelly was born and raised here, a boy with delicate features and a quiet voice whose shyness was noticeable even in elementary school. House Brendan stood on the outskirts of the town, a little lopsided, but well-groomed. The low fence and flowers in the front garden are the work of his mother, Vivian Kelly. She worked in a local laundry and was famous for her ability to remove any stain, be it from machine oil or from berry juice. Father, Jake Kelly, worked in a small metal parts manufacturing plant. His father's hands, burned and scarred, seemed an eternal reminder of the harshness of local life. The house was filled with familiarity, quiet routine. In the morning, everyone is sitting at the kitchen table, listening to the coffee maker whirring, and Vivian glances at Brendan through her thin-rimmed glasses. "Are you on the computer all night again? Don't forget your homework, honey." The father, leafing through an old sports newspaper, just mutters, "Let him study, Vivi. At his age, I was already working part-time to buy a car." Brendan had no older or younger brothers or sisters, only children. It often seemed to him that although his parents loved him, they did not understand why he was so quiet and uncommunicative. Jake thought that his son simply lacked masculine character, but did not pry into his soul. He frowned silently, noticing that Brendan was not eager to play football with the neighbor guys. In schools, Brendan didn't have a large circle of friends, just a couple of guys, just as modest, who preferred to sit in the library than yell in the hallway. Brendan's days passed monotonously. Lessons, rare conversations, the road home under dusty trees, and dreams of how after school he would go somewhere to a big city. However, things started to change when I got closer to high school. Physique, most of the guys began to change. They grew, got stronger, became noisier and more aggressive. And it began ill-fated gym lessons, changing clothes in the locker room, where everyone tried to assert themselves at the expense of the other. That's where Slade Hunter, the star of the local basketball team, tall, with a self-confident grin, noted that Brendan, to put it mildly, is different in size. One day after training, Slade laughed loudly. "Hey, people, look at this little guy. Hell, he's no bigger than his pinky finger." The guys in the locker room burst out laughing. Someone shouted, "Maybe he even has it there, nothing, no." Brendan felt his face flush, and a chill ran down his spine. He tried to hide behind the locker door, but Slade jumped up and continued his taunts. "Come on, show yourself, little Bren, or are you completely suffocating?" Evil laughs and the towel tossing seemed endless. Brendan, the same day, hated physical education lessons and any sports uniform that required changing in front of others. Since then, the nickname Baby Bren stuck to him tightly. Some said this in a whisper, others deliberately loudly. Even those who were not involved in the bullying sometimes brought up the name in conversation. It served as a reminder to Brendan that he was not like that. Brendan's salvation was computers. He came home, slammed the door to his room, and sat down at an old PC that his father bought on the occasion of a sale. There, in the virtual world, Brendan felt more confident. He spent hours reading articles, studying programming at the simplest level, and watching videos on how to assemble a system unit with his own hands. Sometimes his mother came into his room. "Sweetie, maybe you can take a walk at least a little." Brendan, without looking up from the screen. "Mom, I have an important setting here." Vivian just sighed tiredly and left to prepare dinner. The internet became for him a window into another world, where he did not have to take off his pants in front of his peers, and communication took place through texts and emoticons. This gave Brendan at least a modicum of confidence. Here he could just be Brain_Bren in the chat without all those stupid nicknames. Father did from time to time attempts to cultivate masculinity. One evening, when Brendan came into the kitchen for a glass of water, Jake called him to his porch, where he smoked a cigarette. "Sit down next to me," he said, patting the old wooden chair. "Why are you hanging your nose all the time? Maybe you should take up some sports, huh? Look, this Slade. He, of course, is full of cockroaches, but he plays great. Be friends with him. Maybe you can teach him how to play basketball." Brendan looked up in confusion. "Dad, are you serious? And what? The guy has a goal, talent. You, too, find something that will make you stronger." But Brendan couldn't tell his father what pain Slade himself harmed him, because he considered Slade to be something of a local star worthy of imitation. In addition, conversations about what exactly became the subject of ridicule in the locker room were for the young guy too humiliating and personal. He clenched his fists, stood up, and said quietly, "No, Dad, basketball is definitely not my thing, and I'll figure it out somehow." Jake only snorted. "Do what you want, just don't be a slob." When Brendan left for school, he was already in advance. He came up with routes to avoid crossing paths with Slade and his team. Sometimes in the corridor, he heard people whispering behind him. "Look, this is the guy who—" "Come on, is it true?" "SHH, shut up." "Ha ha ha." Sometimes girls also joined in the teasing, although they thought it was more for fun laugh with popular guys. One of them, passing by, could say with feigned regret, "Oh, what are you like? Small? You mean very small?" Brendan was just trying to ignore it. But everything inside was shrinking. I wanted to scream, smash the locker with my fist, or run wherever my eyes looked. He consoled himself with the thought, "Just a little more and I'll finish school. I'll go further away. Everything will be different there." On long evenings, sitting in his room, Brendan watched videos from major cities, the skyscrapers of New York, the ultra-modern offices of Seattle, the ancient districts of Chicago. He was thinking about how there, in a big city, people don't know your past, they don't judge you by hearsay. Once he even tried to talk to his mother about this topic. "Mom, when I finish school, I want to leave. Maybe go to college in another state." Vivian lowered the towel she was using to wipe the plate and answered softly, "I understand that it's difficult for you here. But don't think that running away is always the answer. This is not an escape," he managed. "I just don't want to stay in a place where I—" She came up and hugged him, realizing that he had not finished speaking. Vivian did not know the full depth of his problems, but she saw that her son suffered. "You are a smart boy. You do what you think is necessary. The main thing is don't break yourself." At that moment, Brendan felt a warm support mother, which his father did not know how to give him. And this calmed his soul a little. One day, when Brendan was 16, the most humiliating episode occurred. In gym class, when everyone was practicing running, Slade Hunter, who led the basketball team, decided it would be fun to steal Brendan's shorts while he was running on the treadmill. Slade ran up, gave the elastic a sharp tug, and the fabric flew down. In a panic, Brendan grabbed his underpants so as not to be completely naked, but still part of the view managed to appear in front of his classmates. There were shouts of laughter, someone whistled, and one of the girls covered their eyes with their hands, pretending to be indignant. "Well, little Bren, show off your piece." Slade was choking with laughter, and his friends laughed, like a herd of hyenas. Brendan managed to pull on his shorts and rushed away, waving off from ridicule. He ran past the coach, who, of course, noticed the noise, but was in no hurry to intervene. Everyone knew that Slade was a budding star, and many teachers turned a blind eye to his antics. This episode became the last straw. Back home, Brendan for the first time locked himself in his room and gave vent to tears. He could not understand why they were treating him this way and what he had done wrong before these people. Let them all go to hell. Someday I will show them that my strength is not in my fucking size, but in what I can achieve. This bitter, and at the same time angry, thought pounded through Brendan's head as he stared out the window at the dim light of the street lamp. For the first time in his life, not only resentment began to simmer in him, but also determination to get out of this hole and prove to everyone that he is not a nonentity. After a painful high school experience, Brendan Kelly is relieved to leave his small Indiana home behind and head off to college, hoping for a fresh start in life. The small campus, red brick buildings, and green lawns where students read, play ball, and laugh in the open air seemed almost like a fairy tale to Brendan. He moved into an old hostel on the second floor. The roommate was a guy named Tom Martino Skinny, smiling, with curly dark hair. When we met, Tom shook his hand and laughed. "Hi, I'm Tom. If anything, my door is always open for you, buddy." Brendan was not used to such cordiality, so he only smiled awkwardly. "I'm Brendan. Nice to meet you. Thank you." Tom, it turns out, was studying to be a designer and was obsessed with anime. Costume sketches were piled on his desk, and the walls were covered with posters of anime characters. Once, with a mischievous grin, he said to Brendan, "Listen, if you don't mind, sometimes I'll try on costumes right here. I need a live mannequin, hee hee. Look, you will become my main model." Brendan, dumbfounded, just nodded. "Well, let's try. I guess I can." At first, he felt a little out of place, but Tom turned out to be friendly and never bothered with questions about the past. It was perfect for Brendan. In one of the first weeks of his studies, Brendan mistakenly walked into the wrong classroom. Instead of a lecture on programming, he ended up with a guest lecturer on marketing. He was about to leave, but the hall was crowded and someone quietly addressed him. "Hey, did you end up in the wrong place too?" Brendan turned around and saw a girl with reddish hair pulled back into a messy bun. Her eyes sparkled mischievously, and her smile was confident and friendly. "Yes, I seems to have mixed up the audience," he admitted, embarrassed. "Stay. The lecturer talks interestingly about brand promotion, in case it comes in handy. I'm Stella, by the way, Stella Reed." She answered with a casual smile. Brendan felt himself blush at her directness. "Brendan, nice to meet you. If you don't mind if I stand here by the door. Of course, wait. You'll see, in 5 minutes, you'll want to stay until the end." So he involuntarily listened to the entire lecture. Soon they left the audience together. "Which house are you in, Brendan?" Stella asked, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. "I'm in it. Programming and all that." He shrugged. "Cool. We marketers are always short of guys who know about technology. Maybe you can help me one day with setting up social networks for one of my projects. I will have to." He smiled confusedly. "No question. If you have time, contact me. Glad to help." She nodded and waved goodbye. "See you then. I'll go catch up with my people." Brendan, looking after her, experienced a strange excitement. Stella seemed like a light that suddenly illuminated his new world. A couple of days later, Tom dragged him to a student party in the assembly hall. "Bro, you can't sit in the room all the time. Let's go. There's pizza, music, good company. Besides, did you see how you were staring at that redhead? Maybe she will too." Brendan smiled forcedly. "I'm not a big fan of noise and crowds, but okay, we'll see." Electronic music was blaring in the hall, and students were dancing and laughing around them. Somewhere in the corner, someone was chewing pizza. Someone was drinking something obviously stronger. Brendan stood against the wall, feeling awkward, when he suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Wow, this is where our guy showed up." It was Stella. With a plastic cup in hand and a beaming smile, she approached him. "Do you like parties, or were you dragged here by force?" "Well, rather by force. But you have." "Fun here," he said, glancing sideways at the noisy crowd. "How about we dance?" she suggested and extended her hand to him. He was a little confused. Not really." "Oh, come on. Let's go. Move to the rhythm and don't bother." They went out onto the makeshift dance floor. Stella moved confidently, rhythmically, and Brendan at first played the role of the pillar, but gradually relaxed. She laughed and led him into the dance, as if not noticing his awkwardness. After this evening, they began to cross paths and communicate more often. It's interesting that they had quite a few common topics: music, films, and simply discussing student life. One evening, Brendan was walking across campus and found Stella on a bench with a book on advertising. "Are you studying marketing again?" he asked. "Aha, we need to prepare a project. How are you?" "I'm studying to be a programmer. It sounds more boring than yours," he grinned. Come on, more boring. We marketers are always in need of it people, so stick close, Kelly, she winked. Brendan felt an unusual warmth. She joked, chatted, and encouraged him so easily and naturally. Soon they began to spend time together almost every day, in the dining room, in the library, and on weekends. One day, while walking in the evening, Stella suddenly asked, "Are you always this quiet, or are you just in a bad mood?" "Yes, I don't like attracting attention to myself at all. Maybe it's because of school stories." Everyone had school problems, but here everything is different, you know. Brendan nodded, looking down. Probably yes. I've just never felt as relaxed with new people as I do with you. That's good. Glad to hear, she smiled, gently touching his shoulder. Their relationship developed rapidly. Once, when neighbor Tom went to his parents for the weekend, Stella came to Brendan's dorm. "I brought cakes and a movie. Will you join me?" she said, smiling slyly. "Of course, I was just thinking about what to do today," he answered, letting her into the room. They sat on the bed, watched some light comedy, and laughed, clinging to each other. Gradually, the film faded into the background. The kisses became deeper, the hands became bolder. Stella bit her lip and looked at him in a way that made Brendan's insides throb. He responded with a passionate kiss, and soon they began to undress. Suddenly, an old anxiety seemed to pierce Brendan. He froze, pulling away. Stella felt it. "Hey, what happened?" she asked, looking into his eyes. "I'm afraid that. I'm embarrassed to say, but I have." He stopped short, feeling a lump in his throat. "Are you worried about the size?" she continued softly, as if reading his thoughts. "Well, yes. I've never spoken about it so directly. At school I was, well, teased. The nickname was given. Listen, I understand that you have your own complexes. But damn, I don't give a damn," Stella exclaimed. "The main thing is that you exist. I like it. And forget about any sizes." He sighed, feeling horror and shame mixing in his head. But when Stella pressed herself against him again, he felt that he could trust her. Their intimacy was tender and passionate at the same time. For the first time in his life, Brendan felt that he was not being judged or looked at with a grin. On the contrary, Stella made it clear in every touch that they accepted him completely. After that, they lay under a thin blanket, breathing heavily. "That was damn cool," Stella whispered, stroking his shoulder. "Thank you," Brendan muttered and smiled, realizing how stupid that word sounded after everything that had happened. "Don't you dare think that I'm saying this out of pity. Everything was amazing," she added. He looked at her with gratitude. "I believe, and thank you for being, well, just thank you." Now they began to have real romance. Breakfasts in the student canteen, going to the cinema together, long conversations about the future. Stella talked about her parents, who always supported her. She talked about how she dreams of someday launching her own clothing line, or at least improving her skills in promoting brands in order to help talented designers. Brendan shared his plans for a career in it. "I want to do something of my own, maybe a startup, or maybe just develop and get into a large company. I like everything related to technology," he said. "You will definitely succeed," Stella assured him, and in her eyes he saw sincere admiration. Every day Brendan felt that his old fear was moving further away. He still remained modest, but no longer perceived it as a flaw. If someone joked about him, he simply brushed it off. After all, Stella was nearby, who saw much more in him than size or shyness. Brendan and Stella's wedding took place in a small country hotel under the warm May sun. The bridesmaids were chirping, the photographer was clicking his camera, and the groom, tense and happy at the same time, stood at the altar and turned the ring in his hands as if he was afraid to drop it. There weren't too many guests. Stella didn't like lavish celebrations, and Brendan was ready to sign at City Hall in the morning just to avoid the crowd. But they still wanted to make this day special. "Damn, I haven't slept all night," Brendan admitted in a whisper as Stella approached in her elegant white dress. "Me too. But look how great it turned out," she smiled, touching his hand. At that moment, when the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Brendan thought that his whole past life mockery, ridicule, and complexes remained in another world. Now in his eyes there was only Stella, with a radiant smile and red curls escaping from her stylish hairstyle. After the official party, everyone moved to the backyard of the hotel, where tables with snacks and champagne stood under a white tent. Brendan's parents, a little confused by the capital situation, exchanged thanks with Stella's parents. Tom, Brendan's old college friend, started a motley campaign of designers and marketers who noisily congratulated the newlyweds. Finally, the moment for a celebratory toast arrived. For these two eccentrics, Tom declared, raising his glass, who managed to find each other in this crazy world. I wish they never lose that spark. Everyone drank, and then Stella, catching Brendan's gaze, said in a whisper, Looks like it's time to get going. I don't want to spend the whole day in a crowd. I completely agree, he chuckled. An hour later, they escaped from their own celebration, leaving the guests to have fun. The newlyweds stole a rented convertible and sped off towards their first day of life together. A couple of months after their honeymoon, Brendan and Stella moved to the suburbs of Chicago in a neat little house on a quiet street. The big city was noisy with skyscrapers about half an hour away, but a calm rhythm reigned here. Well-groomed lawns, the morning breeze from the neighboring lake, and friendly neighbors. At first, they rented a house because the purchase immediately seemed risky. Both were starting careers, and they didn't want to take on unaffordable loans. However, as soon as they crossed the threshold, Stella immediately began planning where she would place the furniture and where she would hang her paintings. Look, here you can put a bookshelf, she said, running her hand along the living room wall. And over there is a small sofa. You love to lie around with your laptop. Can we really afford a sofa and shelving at the same time? Brendan laughed, throwing cardboard boxes in the hallway. We worked so hard to start earning normal money, Stella snorted. Give us some basic amenities, man. He looked at her, grinning. Okay, how much might a sofa cost there? To hell with it, let's buy it, we need to have sex somewhere, he winked. Damn, Brendan, you're talking about the important stuff right away, aren't you? She laughed. They liked to fool around. After all the difficulties of studying and finding a job, this playful lightness gave life an indescribable taste. Immediately after the move, Brendan got a job at the IT department of a large company that supplied electronic equipment. Working days took place in a modern office center with panoramic windows and gray steel elevators. This was not some glamorous startup, rather a reputable company that valued professionalism and stability. Every morning, Brendan got up early to make it to the office without traffic jams. He loved this routine. He felt like a full-fledged part of a large mechanism. His colleagues turned out to be friendly, and no one tried to humiliate him or ridicule him. On the contrary, they appreciated his intelligence and careful approach to tasks. Hey, Kelly, sometimes the boss shouted across the entire open space, your code on our web service is going great. They say the clients are happy, keep it up. That's good to hear, boss. Brendan answered with a smile. Stella, meanwhile, was fulfilling her old dream, opening a fashion boutique called Sophie's Charm. She rented a small space in a shopping center and patiently prepared the storefront, handling contracts and orders. Inside, behind the glass door, she placed samples of designer outfits and placed a mirrored table at the cash register to make everything look stylish and expensive. I have no idea how to pull this all off, she admitted one evening as they sat in the kitchen eating pizza from a box. Rent is expensive, plus I have to pay for advertising on Instagram and all that. You can handle it, Brendan replied confidently, reaching out to put his arm around her shoulders. You have great taste, I always knew that. I want to believe, Stella sighed. But it's still scary. Hell, every businessman starts with this. Don't piss, sunshine. He kissed her on the top of her head. Hearing his words, she smiled. Deep down, Stella had the idea of promoting really interesting things from emerging fashion designers, and Sophie's Charm seemed like a big step forward for her. After a couple of months, they began to settle in and brought the remaining things from college. The house was gradually filled with comfort. Bundles of dried herbs were hung in the kitchen, books and cute trinkets were placed in the living room. We even bought the very sofa we were talking about, simple, but with soft upholstery. One evening, Stella, returning from the boutique, saw that only the floor lamp was burning in the living room, and on the table there was a bottle of wine and two glasses. Brendan stood at the window and looked at the street lights. Yes, she smiled, kicking off her shoes. What are you so busy with? I thought it had been a long time since we had a romantic evening. Maybe we can have a drink. With pleasure, she came up and took the glass. Are you depressed about something? Not really, he shrugged. I just wanted to be alone without all this noise. They sat on the sofa, cross-legged, quietly talking about their day, about the funny clients of the boutique, about the news at Brendan's work. The music was playing quietly, some kind of background jazz. Stella suddenly reached out to him and stroked his cheek. Listen, do you remember the first time we were in the dorm in college? How can I not remember? He smiled wryly, remembering that adrenaline and fear. Now I'm no longer a boy. So show me what kind of boy you are, she whispered, pressing a kiss to his lips. The wine splashed onto the rim of the glass, and Stella swung her legs over his lap, snuggling closer. Brendan, overcome with desire, ran his hand along her waist and slowly unzipped her dress. She bit her lip, allowing him to slide his palm over her bare thigh. Damn, how I want you, he muttered, brushing her hair away from her face and covering her neck with kisses. Carry on, I'm in no hurry, she exhaled, leaning back on the sofa. They made love right there, under the quiet light of the floor lamp, not paying attention to the fact that it was night outside and the neighbors might see lights in the windows. Passion intertwined with tenderness. He treasured every moment, and she responded with mutual devotion. After that, they lay for a long time, throwing the blanket on the floor, feeling how their growing feelings made them real partners in this life, and not just young lovers from college. Everyday life went on as usual. In the morning, in a hurry to get ready, kiss each other on the cheek, wish each other good luck. In the evening, a quick dinner, stories about how the day went. On weekends, they went to the center of Chicago, walked along the embankment, and went to a cafe. Sometimes Stella had to rush to a meeting with a fabric supplier at the last minute, and Brendan could sit at his laptop all evening, finishing a piece of code. And all this, by some miracle, did not stress, but on the contrary, pleased them both. They felt like a full-fledged family, where everyone is moving towards their dream, and together they are stronger. Often in the evenings, they left everything and lay down on the carpet in the living room just to talk. Stella talked about customers who come to the boutique and spend hours trying on dresses, and Brendan shared stories about how at work they implement new software and clients always break something with their incorrect settings. You know, sometimes I think I'm lucky as hell, Stella said one day, looking at him as he lazily clicked the TV remote control. Why is this? He was surprised. Well, because I met you, a smart, kind, and slightly nerdy guy who makes me feel like a queen. She touched his hair with her fingertips. Thank you for believing in me when I was still very green, Brendan smiled, pulling her towards him. Damn, sometimes I still can't believe this is real. She laughed and lightly punched him on the shoulder. Come on, believe it. This is all ours, and I like the way we live, my damn romantic. At that second, Brendan felt that it seemed that right now he was the happiest person in the world. In the house, filled with their common plans and laughter, there was no place for old complexes or other people's ridicule. There was love here, and it was damn cool. Several years have passed since Brendan and Stella began their life together in the suburbs of Chicago. Previously, he watched with a smile as she returned from the Sophie's Charm boutique, tired but happy, and in the evening she happily talked about the details of the past day. He liked to hear about new clothing arrivals, strange clients, and how fashion shows were organized in the city. But gradually Brendan began to notice that the usual stories had disappeared from their conversations, and Stella seemed to be closing herself off from him. One evening he was sitting in the kitchen, dealing with work email on his laptop, when he heard the front door open. Stella returned, but it was already long after midnight. Brendan looked up at her. "You're late. Is everything okay?" She quickly threw her bag on the shelf from the doorway and changed her shoes to slippers. "Yes, everything is fine. I had a lot to do, so I stayed late at the boutique. There were also a couple of meetings that I forgot to warn about." Once upon a time, they both would have laughed at such confusion, but now Stella looked wary. She almost immediately went into the bathroom and, judging by the sounds, began to turn on the water and whisper something on the phone. Brendan caught himself thinking that her voice sounded strange. Now she spoke quietly and abruptly, as if she didn't want him to hear. He felt awkward. He was not used to eavesdropping, but suspicion began to stir in the depths of his soul. Over the following weeks, similar episodes have become more frequent. Stella was increasingly late at work, complaining about some endless meetings and negotiations, and at home she was the first to grab the phone if it started ringing or vibrating. When Brendan casually asked who it was, she waved it off. "Yes, so, for business." She spoke about it quickly and interspersed her words with short phrases. "I'll figure it out myself. Everything is fine, don't worry." Previously, she was always willing to discuss matters, but now it seemed that it was closed. More than once he had to dine alone, throwing ready-made dishes into the microwave. Stella shuddered whimsically when he tried to invite her to eat together. "I don't want to know. I managed to grab something at the boutique. I'm sorry." Watching her, Brendan felt more and more that something was not so. Sometimes he noticed that Stella literally did not let go of the phone from her hands. Before, he could accidentally take her mobile phone from the table if he heard a call, but now she abruptly stopped such attempts. "Don't touch me, I'll answer it myself." Flashed in her eyes restless light when the phone vibrated at an inopportune hour. Sometimes she turned away from Brendan and quickly typed messages. She did not say what was discussed and with whom. She returned from the boutique at different times. It could have been 8 in the evening or 1 in the morning without logic and without warning. When Brendan tried to ask what was going on, Stella just waved it off. "Fuck off. I'm going through a difficult period. I'll explain everything later." The words were irritated, which was not at all typical for her. The previous warm intonation has disappeared somewhere. Brendan kept asking himself, when was the last time we were truly close? He remembered the evenings when they could cuddle on the sofa, or how they would whisper over dinner, laughing about joint plans for the weekend. He recalled how Stella used to share news about the boutique with sparkling eyes, ask for advice, and combine her design ideas with his practical approach. Now she seemed to shy away from any conversations on personal topics. He tried to remember the last time they made love, and the events of a week or maybe more ago popped up in my head. Stella reduced any attempts at physical intimacy to excuses. She was tired, her head hurt, she was in no mood. Once he would have accepted this calmly, but now it already looked too suspicious. Moments from their recent conversation also came to mind. "Stella, remember how great we spent our evenings before? Maybe we can go to a restaurant and have a date." He tried to revive the atmosphere. "Not now, Brendan. There's no time for that at all," she answered with a heavy sigh and went into the bedroom. It was hard to be alone with my thoughts. Brendan tried to make an excuse by saying that Stella's business could indeed be going through a difficult period, but the idea grew more and more powerful in him that it was not just about business. He saw how she shudders strangely when she hears calls, tries not to look him in the eyes, and loses her temper even over small things. Soon it settled in Brendan's soul, a painful feeling as if there was an invisible wall next to him. He still loved Stella and wanted to believe that she simply had a difficult schedule. However, the chill that arose between them became more and more obvious. On rare joint dinners, the silence could only be interrupted by short phrases. "How's work?" "Everything is fine. How about you?" "Me too." Each such laconic communication only emphasized how much they moved away from each other. Brendan increasingly looked into emptiness and caught himself thinking that he missed old Stella smiling, sincere, accessible. He wanted to do something, but he didn't understand where to start. Asking yourself the question, what's happened? Why has everything changed? He couldn't find an answer. Every time I tried to talk frankly, I ran into irritation or evasive sighs. And sometimes Stella avoided the conversation altogether, citing fatigue. Brendan began to suspect many things. Maybe it's something to do with the boutique. Maybe she's afraid they're having financial problems. What if she is sick with something and doesn't want to talk? However, all these options were just spinning in my head without confirmation and understanding of how to find out the truth. In the evenings, he locked himself in his office, sorted out his mail, or got stuck in the news, but his thoughts kept coming back to the same thing. Their relationship is changing, and he doesn't understand why. It was then that the same feeling arose in his heart that nothing good would come out of this situation if he didn't sort it out. But Stella did not make contact, and he, confused, did not know how to regain her affection or at least get answers to his questions. Gradually, suspicions were getting stronger. What if he was already not the main person in her life? And what is going on behind his back? Several weeks have passed since a tense silence reigned between Brendan and Stella. Their rare conversations amounted to dry exchanges of phrases, and Stella continued to return home at different times. Brendan felt that something was wrong, but did not dare to have a frank conversation. He was afraid of receiving an equally frank answer. One day, when Brendan had to go to a meeting for work, he left the house and found his own car blocked by a neighbor's car. Stella had already left somewhere in a taxi, leaving her car in the driveway. Unable to think of any other option, Brendan decided to use her car. The keys were on the kitchen table. Entering the salon, he caught himself feeling a strange excitement. Stella, as a rule, did not like it when someone touched her personal belongings without permission. However, now the circumstances were such that he had no choice. He got behind the wheel, started the engine, and reached into the glove box for his insurance and registration papers. Opening the drawer, Brendan saw some kind of box there. My first thought was that it might be a package of tissues or something for feminine needs. But looking closer, he realized that it was condoms. His heart sank when he saw the indicated size on the package, XL. Such condoms were certainly not intended for him. He knew that too well. Brendan felt a rush of adrenaline and a dull ache in his chest. Perhaps this. Is this a mistake? He said in a whisper, leaning back in his seat. His hands were shaking, and he involuntarily began to scroll through his head about where they could have come from. But the explanations that came to his mind were extremely disappointing. A minute later, he closed the box and got out of the car without going to the meeting. His head was noisy, and everything inside was racked with suspicion. Returning to the house, he sat for a long time on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. Images appeared before his eyes. Stella with someone else, Stella returning late and checking her phone. Indignation, resentment, and something similar to panic raged inside him. I don't want to draw hasty conclusions, but how can I not do this? He thought, turning over their last conversations in his mind. For the rest of the day, Brendan was unable to concentrate on his work. I constantly caught myself gnawing at some annoying thought. Is she lying to me? Who is she dating? Or maybe there is some other explanation. When Stella returned home late that evening, Brendan almost blurted out, I saw condoms in your glove compartment. What the hell is going on? But, noticing the tired expression on her face and her strained smile, he did not find the strength to start a scandal. Stella said she was tired and immediately went to the bedroom. Remaining in the living room, he walked in circles for a long time, crossing his arms over his chest. What to do? Ask directly. And what if she gets out of it or accuses him of being a spy? Try to figure it out yourself. But how to do this if Stella hides any personal details of the last weeks from him? At some point, Brendan took out his phone and started looking for contact information for private detectives in Chicago. Never before had he thought that he would have to solve such a problem using such methods, but now he could not do otherwise. After looking at several sites, he chose Christian Blake, about which there were many positive reviews. This is crazy, but it seems there is no other way, he said out loud, feeling an alarming but decisive feeling within himself. He called the number provided and made an appointment for the next day. A dull voice on the other end of the line only asked, Can you briefly say what the essence of the matter is? I suspect my wife of. Brendan paused and said, I need to confirm or deny this. I'm sure you understand. Understand? Come, we'll discuss everything, Christian replied in an even tone. After hanging up, Brendan closed his eyes. The feeling of guilt was mixed with burning jealousy and cold resentment. He understood that this step could change their marriage forever, but he could no longer tolerate the uncertainty. Condoms he'd never heard of couldn't have just been a ridiculous accident. The next day, Brendan asked to leave work under the pretext of urgent matters. He drove halfway across town to a small office located in a shabby building with peeling paint on the facade. I went up to the fourth floor along a narrow staircase and found myself in front of a door with the sign, Christian Blake, Private Investigator. Inside was a cramped room with an old leather sofa, a table littered with folders, and a computer on a cracked wooden table. Christian himself looked to be about 40 years old, with piercing eyes and light stubble on his square chin. Looking Brendan up and down, he nodded curtly. Have a seat. Tell me everything in detail. Brendan sat up, standing up slightly because the springs of the sofa were almost digging into his thigh, and began to talk. The words came out incoherently. He felt stupid. However, Christian listened attentively and did not interrupt. After the story, the detective leaned back in his chair. Understand. The situation is typical, unfortunately. It may or may not be cheating. But facts are facts. You found someone else's condoms, and whether you like it or not, you must either confirm suspicions or dispel them. Brendan clenched his fists in his lap. I want to know the truth. I need, well, everything you can find out. I charge monthly for my work. It is possible that we will have to keep an eye on her, see who she meets if she meets. Do you understand? Understand. Money is not a problem. Brendan swallowed the lump in his throat. If it helps get answers. Christian nodded, handing Brendan a small form. Fill in your details here. Leave your wife's contacts, her car, phone number. Indicate on what days she goes away most often. I'll take care of the observation. Brendan's heart was pounding as he wrote out all the details. Conflicting thoughts flashed through my head, from anger to the desire to give up everything and never know the truth. But he forced himself to reach the end, signed the necessary papers, and stood up. Okay, I'll let you know when I have something to report, Christian said, shaking his hand. Returning home, Brendan found empty rooms. Stella was at meetings again. He went into the kitchen, mechanically poured himself some water, and drained the glass in one gulp. The evening dragged on endlessly. He tried to read the news, watch the series, but every 5 minutes he jumped from the vibration of his phone, expecting a call from Christian. However, the phone was silent. Stella showed up around midnight, tired as always. Brendan just nodded silently in response to her meager hello, not finding the strength to start a conversation. Thoughts about condoms and the ordered investigation haunted him. He watched Stella furtively, hoping to see at least a hint that she would explain everything. But she only smiled briefly and immediately locked herself in the bathroom. That's how sleepless nights started, filled with painful anticipation of an answer to the main question: what's happening? Now he could only wait for the detective to give him some clarity. But was he ready for any result? He didn't know this and had no idea how to live further if everything turned out to be much worse than he feared. About 3 weeks had passed since the meeting with Detective Christian Blake. During this time, Brendan became noticeably haggard. Sleepless nights, constant tension, and fear of finding out the truth plagued him. Periodically, Blake reported with dry messages, "We need more time. There are some clues, but it's too early to say." And every time Brendan winced when he heard the notification sound on his phone. In the morning, when Stella left, on business as usual, Brendan sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, aimlessly looking at the laptop screen. He wondered if he should turn it all to hell, forget about the hired detective, and try to talk to Stella directly. But the memory of the found condoms and the constant lies gnawed at my brain. I can't live like this. I need to know what's going on. he muttered quietly and ran his hand through his hair. That evening, Blake called and asked to meet at the agreed-upon location, a small diner on the outskirts of town. Brendan arrived and saw the detective in the far corner, with a discreet glass of coffee in front of him. He nodded silently to the chair opposite. "Well, is there any news?" Brendan asked, looking at Blake's concentrated face. "Eat. But I warn you, it can really get on your nerves." "Ready." Brendan's heart sank. "Speak." Christian placed a small briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside were photos and envelopes with flash drives. "I've been following your wife for a couple of weeks, just like we agreed. Let's be honest, she has a busy life, and a sexy one too." B-bitch Brendan just exhaled, feeling how cold everything inside was. Blake began to place several black and white and color photographs in front of him. In some, Stella got out of an expensive Jeep. In others, she entered the entrance of a condominium. But here and there were more candid shots. She stood against the wall with a man who hugged her waist and kissed her neck. Or she sat next to him in a cafe, holding her hand on his knee. "Here, do you see this big guy? Name is Slade Hunter. I caught them meeting at the hotel a couple of times. Sometimes they would just cuddle in the car in the parking lot. But apparently, there was definitely sex there. They went to the room and stayed for at least an hour." Brendan swallowed convulsively as he looked at the pictures. He recognized Slade's old-school enemy, a basketball star who once bullied him. Real nightmare of the past surfaced in reality and now had his wife. "Slade, damn," Brendan hissed, not believing his own eyes. Blake shook his head and pulled out a few more photos. "But this is not her only partner. Look, this is Lucian Thorne, aka Luke, officially an auto mechanic, but he has a reputation as some kind of rebel with tattoos and connections in the underground business. I filmed how she came to his workshop after closing. In general, everything is clear." One of the photographs showed the workshop itself a crude sign, an open gate. Stella stood at the hood of an old muscle car, and next to her was a tall man with massive shoulders and sleeves of tattoos. They laugh, then he pulls her close and kisses her. Brendan felt his insides blazing with hatred. But this was not the end yet. Blake posted the latest batch of photos. Stella in a bright sun hat, next to a striking blonde with a model appearance. "This is Sophie Marshall, a former model who now owns a luxury spa. I followed them twice. Apparently, they are, let's say, not only friends. I recorded one of their conversations. I have audio." Blake inserted one of the flash drives into the tablet on his lap and handed Brendan the headphones. Immediately, muffled steps were heard, then women's voices. It was not difficult to recognize Stella's voice. "Stella, Sophie, damn it. We said that we wouldn't have these stupid feelings. Do you really want more? Sophie, I want you, and I don't care about your excuses." Stella, "Well, I want it too, but I have. Damn it, and Slade and Luke." Stella's voice sounded as if she was discussing a simple fact of life, how to choose a dress, not three lovers. Brendan almost dropped his headphones, hearing with his own ears his wife admitting that she had some partners. Putting down his headphones, Brendan bit his lip to keep from swearing out loud. His eyes filled with anger and pain, and a spasm squeezed his throat. "Three people. She. Bitch," he whispered, gathering his thoughts. "I understand that this is not easy, but you paid for the truth, here it is," Blake answered calmly. "I know that this is a star basketball player from her past, this tattooed auto mechanic. Well, Sophie is an equally active lady. According to my information, they have been communicating for several months." Blake pulled out several sheets of paper with his notes, dates, meeting times, even hotel room numbers. Brendan felt like he had a case file from a crime series on his hands. "Damn, how?" he said, leafing through the printed materials. "She, your mother, leads 3 or even 4. It looks like this. And to be honest, it works neatly. I don't know how you caught the condoms. She probably didn't hide them well enough. Or maybe she just didn't expect you to get into her car." Brendan ran his hand over his face, feeling his cheeks burn. He wanted to howl with resentment and destroy everything around him. Jealousy, humiliation, and the dull realization that his wife had long been behind his back were writhing inside him. Sleeping with 3 lovers at once. It was especially hard to see the name of Slade, the man who had done him so much harm back in school. When Blake finished his explanation, he carefully placed the photos and audio into a brown folder. Here, take it. I've done my job. There is a detailed report, call records, correspondence, and photographic evidence. If you want to check it yourself, everything is there. God. Okay. How much do I owe you for all this? Brendan asked hoarsely. They discussed payment, and Blake held out a pen for him to sign the remaining formalities. My advice is don't do anything rash. Often, after such discoveries, people commit rash acts. Think about how you want to live with this further, the detective added finally. Thank you, Brendan said shortly, hiding the folder in his bag and rising from his chair. He walked out of the diner with a heavy gait. My heart was pounding as if it was going to jump out of my chest. Snatches of phrases were spinning in his head. Sophie, I don't care. Slade, Luke, many months. Until the last, he hoped that it would be just one person, a fatal mistake, or a short affair. But 3, damn, it looked like a mockery of his entire life. Squeezing the steering wheel of his car, he sat for a long time in the parking lot with his eyes closed. The folder with the evidence lay on the next seat, like a sentence from which there was no longer any escape. This is complete meanness. What the hell is she doing? And damn, I'm an idiot. Brendan whispered, realizing that from now on his world would never be the same. He turned on the ignition and drove out onto the road, not knowing where to go now. Returning to a house where everything was riddled with lies seemed unthinkable. But he also could not live in ignorance. All he has left is burning pain, betrayal, and a folder that could confirm how deeply he was betrayed. Brendan drove out of the parking lot after talking with the detective, mindlessly circling the streets, trying to calm down and comprehend all the facts about Stella's 3 lovers. Anger and pain seethed inside, demanding an outlet. When he finally returned home and saw Stella's handbag in the hallway, his fists clenched. Until recently, he dreamed of a quiet divorce, or at least an honest conversation. But now, looking at the stack of incriminating evidence, he realized just leaving will be of little consolation to him. She didn't just betray me, she fooled me for months, and even with 3. This thought tormented his mind. The desire to get even for every humiliation and every mocking entry about wanting something more filled all the brain cells. Remembering his school days, Brendan couldn't forget how Slade Hunter humiliated him in front of everyone. Now this bastard has interfered in his life again, and even slept with his wife. Previously, Brendan would have been confused or panicked, but now he only felt vicious determination. Do you want to show off your size? All right, son of a bitch, let's see who's in his lap. He knew little about Luke Thorne, only that this man with tattooed hands and a criminal background was quite capable of dark deeds. The detective's report indicated that Luke often revolves around dubious characters. Perhaps there is also dirt, which you can grab onto. Sophie Marshall, former model, now owner of a luxury spa. Judging by Christian's notes, she's not averse to blackmail wealthy clients. It seems like she has camera recordings that record intimate procedures, and Sophie periodically uses this to extract more money. 3 lovers. 3 creatures that I will make miserable. They don't even suspect that I can dig and break when necessary. Brendan realized that he would not be satisfied with just a divorce or loud accusations. He wanted these people to pay in full. As an IT specialist, Brendan had a good understanding not only of code, but also of how to gain access to other people's accounts. He had never used his knowledge for anything illegal before, but now he thought, I have every right to do this. They crossed all borders. In the coming days, he took his first steps. Hacking Slade's social media. Brendan knew that he was a big fan of showing off and posting tons of photos about his successes in the fitness field. Through a couple of special programs, he managed to extract passwords and then an archive of correspondence. As it turned out, there were transactions for the purchase and sale of steroids, photographs of packed boxes, and mention of leftist suppliers. Checking Luke's phone. It was more difficult to penetrate the auto mechanics system directly, but Brendan found indirect leads, an online platform where Luke corresponded with friends about ordering spare parts, and, judging by the context, it was not only about parts for cars, but also about the cars themselves, which seemed to be stolen and resold. Information about Sophie. She often boasted about her modeling career and had an Instagram page with dozens of glamorous selfies. But what turned out to be more interesting was that Sophie had a closed communication channel with several VIP clients. After digging through old backups and accessing her spa's hacked business account, Brendan found references to potential blackmail. If Mr. X refuses my program, I will be forced to leak the materials where he... It's clear that Sophie had a stash of dirt on rich people who enjoyed special services at her spa. Brendan collected all this into separate folders on his laptop, digital evidence of the criminal or immoral antics of Stella's lovers. He didn't know how exactly he would use the information, but he felt, this will be my power bomb. Amid the unfolding secrets about Slade, Luke, and Sophie, Brendan was haunted by the thought of Stella herself. Once he loved her with all his heart, now any thought about her evoked disgust and a desire to punish. While reading bank documents in the detective's folder, he came across a detail that caught his attention. The Sophie's Charm boutique took out a loan against the security of the house. So that's why she confidently developed the boutique. I thought this was her successful income-generating business, but it turns out she mortgaged our house. Information about this was in the copies of papers that Christian obtained while completing the dossier. It turned out that Stella's boutique was supported by a continuous loan, and a rather risky one, with a floating rate. Brendan realized that if Stella screwed up somewhere or lost her source of income, the bank would take the house. And the house is formally decorated on both, but Stella managed to pull it all off without him knowing anything. Gritting his teeth, Brendan was finally convinced that he wanted to break her so that she felt helpless. You decided to risk our housing for the sake of your ambitions, and even have sex with just anyone. Okay, honey, this will be your death. He was already thinking in his mind, if he competently interfered with the financial flows of the boutique, he could expose Stella to late payments or expose her to suspicion of misuse of funds. Brendan, working in it, had acquaintances who were capable of fooling an accounting account, but he himself understood enough about computer security to pull off such frauds. Before taking action, he often found himself thinking, should I take revenge so harshly? Maybe I'm turning into a monster myself. He hardly slept at night, replaying every step in his head. But memories of Slade's ridicule, Stella's kisses with other men, and the cynical words, "Sometimes you want something more," too much baked his brain. They didn't regret anything. Nobody thought what it was like for me. Okay, so we'll play by their rules. I won't let them continue to laugh behind my back. One day, he went out late at night and stood on the porch for a long time, looking into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, an ambulance siren sounded, and a TV was flashing in the window of a neighbor's house. The smell of approaching rain was in the air. This life that I built home, quiet evenings, love, everything is destroyed. Well, then I will destroy them too. Everyone will get what they deserve. Brendan sat at the bar, fiddling with a glass of cocktail that had already become warm. He rarely went to such establishments, but today he felt that he needed to get out of the house somewhere, and at least for a while take his mind off thoughts of revenge. Scenes from the incriminating evidence were still spinning in his head. Stella with Slade, Luke with wide tattooed shoulders, and now Sophie. He still couldn't believe that this was all happening to him. The bar was half empty. Rare groups were sitting at separate tables. Blues music was playing in the background. Brendan took a sip and winced as the drink lost its taste. He was about to ask for the bill when he suddenly noticed the girl behind the counter. With short hair and dark locks, she quickly handled bottles and glasses and served orders. At some point, their gazes crossed. "Is there something wrong with the cocktail?" she asked. coming closer. The voice was low, slightly hoarse, but pleasant. No, no, everything's fine. Brendan shook his head. I was just thinking. Understand. It's written all over your face that you're seriously weighed down by something, she grinned. Brendan looked at her badge. It said Lucy. It seemed to him that her face was familiar, but he could not remember where he had seen it before. Yes, there are some problems, he sighed, not daring to go into details. If this is a love affair, then welcome to the club, Lucy remarked, pouring herself some soda into a tall glass. He smiled reluctantly, and suddenly a spark flashed through his memory. Stella once mentioned Lucy Gray, a former friend with whom she ended up having a big fight. Brendan didn't pay any attention to it at the time, but the name emerged from the depths of his consciousness. He looked again at the girl's face. Could it be her? Are you, by any chance, Lucy Gray? He burst out. Yes, Gray, what? The girl frowned. Do we know each other? I. Brendan Kelly. Maybe we. He hesitated, not knowing whether to speak. Actually, I'm married to Stella Reed. Well, that is, before Reed, now Kelly. As soon as the name Stella left her lips, Lucy seemed numb. Her facial expression suddenly changed to tense. Damn, Brendan Kelly, Stella, so you're her husband? She said with emphasis. Consider that we know each other in absentia, so to speak. Brendan felt his heart begin to beat alarmingly in his chest. He read hidden hostility, and maybe even anger, in Lucy's eyes. And then all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Stella once mentioned that she stole one guy, Luke, from her college friend. Apparently, the same Lucy Gray. You probably wouldn't want to remember her, he said quietly. Oh, I wish I hadn't, Lucy snorted. But since you're here, and since you're her husband, I can assume that something went wrong with you. Brendan nodded absently. The more he talked with Lucy, the more clearly he realized that she, too, had experienced Stella's betrayal. Over the next half hour, they started talking. The bar wasn't too busy, and Lucy could afford to linger at the bar, chatting with Brendan. Stella was my best friend in college. We lived in the same dorm, walked together, helped with exams, Lucy said, wiping glasses. Then Luke Thorne appeared, a guy with a cool car and a tattoo. I admit I was not indifferent to him, and Stella somehow quickly charmed him. While I was still breaking down, she made the first move. As a result, we quarreled, and Stella literally snatched him out of my hands. And then, after everything, she acted as if she had done nothing wrong. Brendan shook his head sadly. He already knew about Stella's relationship with Luke, but he didn't think that the story had lasted since then. Now he saw in front of him a man who had also been deceived by Stella, albeit many years ago. She cheated on me too, and not with one, but with several at once, Brendan admitted, and Luke is among them. At the mention of Luke's name, Lucy clutched the towel tightly in her hand, her eyes flashing with hatred. Damn, so she's still hooking up with him. What a bitch, she burst out. And how are you going to end this? Tell me you won't tolerate it. Brendan drained the glass in one gulp, feeling the burning taste of alcohol. I'm not going to stand for shit. I have already collected dirt on these scum. I want to take revenge on everyone, not only Luke, but also Slade and this, Sophie, and Stella too. I'm just looking for the best way to do it. Lucy seemed to perk up at these words. She glanced around, made sure there were no extra ears in the bar, and leaned closer. Listen, when Stella took Luke away from me, I lost almost everything. At that moment, she made me look like a capricious fool, and she pretended to be an innocent lamb. I had to leave college, then I wandered around doing small jobs. I want to say, I understand what the thirst for revenge on her is. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Brendan answered sincerely. If you want, we can, sort of do everything together. He himself was surprised at how openly he suggested this, but Lucy nodded immediately. Hell, you don't even have to ask. I'm ready to help. Believe me, I know a lot of Stella's dirty secrets. She is crazy about power and attention. He knows how to twist people, especially guys. If you hit her pride and finances, she will be destroyed, as she has destroyed many in turn. And at the same time, I'll get even with Luke." While Lucy was distracted by a couple of orders, Brendan sat, pondering her words. When she returned, he asked carefully, "You mentioned that she manipulated you. Can you tell me more about what happened?" Lucy sighed, putting down the clean glasses. "It was my sophomore year. I was head over heels in love with Luke. Then he was, of course, rude, but damn charismatic. We got together in groups and went to parties. Stella seemed like just my best friend. She borrowed a dress, shared cosmetics, and helped with my studies. And then, when I began to suspect that Luke was giving up on me, it turned out that they had been sleeping with each other for a long time. And the most disgusting thing is that she pretended that I was exaggerating everything. She persuaded mutual friends, saying, 'Lucy is hysterical. She's imagining everything.' As a result, the whole company turned its back on me." There was bitterness in her voice. Brendan found himself thinking that this was like a reflection of his own story. It was as if Stella had repeated the same trick, only now in marriage. "I lost my temper and started a showdown with Luke. We had a fight. I left the college in tears and shame. Then I found out that he continued to meet with Stella. So I live with this lump of hatred inside, although I should have killed it long ago. But now, apparently, the card lies differently." Lucy smiled bitterly, but the same determined fire burned in her eyes that Brendan felt in himself. When it was time to close the bar, Lucy waved her partner on and pulled Brendan into the back kitchen. There, leaning against the wall, they continued the conversation without fear of unnecessary witnesses. "I like your idea of revenge, but I want to tell you, don't reduce it to the banal revenge to become unhappy. If we're going to do something, then do it in such a way that these people can no longer take advantage of others." "Yes, in general, I think so too," Brendan nodded. "Slade is dealing steroids, Luke is involved in hijackings, Sophie is involved in blackmail, and Stella. Yes, she is also involved in this. If you bring all the dirt to the surface, they will grab it in full." Lucy looked at him thoughtfully, then smiled. "Well, it looks like we're on the same page. I also love the idea of justice, but I admit I wanted to strike Stella more." "Oh yes, I have a separate program for her," Brendan said with a dark grin. "I found out that the boutique she was hoping for was a full loan against which she had mortgaged our house. A couple of shenanigans and everything will be taken away from her, and legally, because it was she who put our house on the line." "Now this is interesting. I can tell you how to make this public," Lucy suggested. "If we pull her out of the market in a big way, she will lose her reputation in the city." They began to discuss the details, exchanging ideas in a whisper: how to trigger an audit by the bank, how to plant the necessary documents with the tax office, how to post dirt on lovers online or hand it over to the police anonymously. The more they talked, the more obvious it became that they needed a carefully thought-out, multi-step strategy. "Each of these bastards has their own Achilles heel," Brendan noted. "Slade is a show-off and a chain of gyms, Luke is crime and driving, Sophie is blackmail, and Stella is her business and pride. We need to hit everyone on their weak spot," Lucy nodded, "and at the same time protect yourself. These people will not remain idle when everything falls apart." By the end of the conversation, Brendan realized that in Lucy he had found an ally who would not be afraid of dirty work for the sake of personal satisfaction. She seemed well aware of how Miss Reed manipulated people and had enough grievances not to be afraid of the consequences. Before leaving, they exchanged numbers and agreed to meet one of these days to continue planning in a more relaxed atmosphere. Brendan returned home almost in the morning, inspired by a strange feeling. He walked along dark streets, where he was only occasionally illuminated by rare lanterns. He thought that now he was not alone in his desire to get even with Stella and her lovers. Somewhere inside, there was still a residual pain from betrayal, but now it was replaced by stern enthusiasm. "I'll do it. We'll do it together." He quietly entered the house. Stella was asleep, curled up on their common bed. Once upon a time, he would have leaned over her, kissed her, and whispered his love. Now he only gloomily gazed at her face and felt contempt accumulating in his soul. Very soon, dear, you will understand what you have done. The sweet life is not for those who trample others without a twinge of conscience, he thought, and went to the guest room, where lately he had preferred to spend the night. That night, for the first time in a long time, Brendan felt almost exhilarated. Not from happiness, of course, but from the decision to strike back and end his own humiliation. And now next to him there is someone who also longs for justice, and such a tandem may turn out to be truly destructive for everyone who betrayed them. A week has passed since Brendan and Lucy decided to take extreme measures and secretly record the meeting of lovers. Together with Christian Blake, they developed a plan of action. From the point of view of morality and law, everything looked very doubtful, but the thirst for exposure and retribution overpowered all doubts. Based on a tip from a detective, it turned out that Sophie Marshall has a special area in her luxury spa VIP room. Officially, it was intended for exclusive procedures and was available only to regular clients with high ability to pay. But according to information Blake received from an anonymous employee, very dubious events were sometimes held in this room. When Lucy first heard about this, she blurted out, "That's the trick. Now it's clear why Sophie runs her business so confidently and blackmails the rich." Brendan, already aware of Sophie's past exploits, only clenched his fists, imagining Stella, Slade, and Luke having fun there with a complete lack of conscience. "We need to find out when their next meeting is scheduled," he said, turning to Blake. "Let's do it," the detective answered briefly. "If I understand correctly, they can organize an evening for their own next weekend. Sophie has a habit of renting out this room after the salon closes." Christian promised to get specific dates through his source, the salon administrator, who was ready to pass on information about closed sessions for a small bribe. A couple of days later, the detective called Brendan. "There is fresh news. Sophie does not accept clients on Saturday after 9 o'clock in the evening. Perhaps that's when the whole gang will gather. My man says that usually, if she locks herself in with her friends, only those employees who are especially trusted remain in the salon, literally a couple of people from her inner circle." Brendan darkened. "Okay, so there won't be many people, but there will probably be security or cameras inside." "Yes, the VIP room definitely has its own video surveillance system for security and in case of blackmail of clients, as we understand. But we can't just hack it from the outside. Everything is fenced off there. You will need to install your own equipment or connect directly," Blake explained. Lucy, after listening to the conversation, suggested, "I know one guy who can create a fake pass to enter the salon as a technical employee. Like he came to check the ventilation or the internet. If you're lucky, you might be able to secretly place cameras." They agreed on this. Brendan would provide the electronic side of the pass, and Lucy would agree with an acquaintance to forge an official form that would allow the detective to get inside under the guise of a master. Brendan pulled out a dusty suitcase from the garage with various electronic belongings. Mini cameras, tiny microphones, wires, even small motion sensors that he had left over from previous experiments. He had previously used some of this for harmless smart home projects, but now he was going to use it on a completely different basis. "It's better to take cameras with a wide angle," he commented, laying out the devices on the table in the living room. "And you need a self-contained power source so you don't have to plug into outlets right in the VIP room that could attract attention." "Where will the picture itself be recorded?" Lucy asked, intently examining the mini microphone. "To a hidden server via a Wi-Fi adapter. Sophie clearly has a corporate internet connection in her salon. I'll configure the camera to send a stream to my remote computer. Even if they later find the cameras, the data will already be saved." Christian, looking at their technological tricks, grinned. "If it weren't for your damn strong motivation, I wouldn't even get involved in this. But apparently, you seriously decided to kill everyone at once." "Don't doubt it," Brendan answered gloomily. "We want to get not only footage of sex, but also recordings of their conversation. so that there is a fact of recognition of illegal cases. Each of them has their own criminal case, and we will show it. A couple of days before the party, Lucy brought a carefully crafted badge and pass, which bore the emblem of a company engaged in its services for spas. The first and last name were fictitious, but Christian's photograph was displayed with the formal signature technician. "Listen, he looks very convincing," Brendan praised, twirling the badge in his hands. "I'll connect him to a fake database so that if Sophie gets through, she'll see our man on the staff list." Lucy nodded. "Yes, if anything, I've already lost the password to enter the site. Here is the information of the new employee. We tried so that there was nothing to complain about." All that remained was to wait for that very Saturday, when the spa would close to outsiders and Sophie would gather her friends Stella, Slade, and Luke for a special session. According to Christian, he has already checked. That evening the salon will indeed be open until 20 o'clock, then the VIP room remains at their disposal. Saturday has arrived. Around 8:30 in the evening, Christian's car parked near the service entrance to Sophie's spa. Christian himself, Lucy, and Brendan were sitting in the car. They fiddled with their phones and checked the connection. "Lucy, you stay in the car on standby, right? If everything goes according to plan, I'll come in and say that I'm fixing the connection or Wi-Fi and install cameras," Christian repeated. "Yes, if things get hot, I'll call Brendan, and he'll be able to tweak something in real time through his laptop." "Well, or we're trying to get you out," she nodded. "And I will be in touch, checking the feed from the cameras if they are quickly activated. Remember, the camera needs to be placed in such a way that it captures the entire room without being conspicuous," Brendan added, nervously glancing at his watch. Christian got out of the car, straightened his work jacket with the logo of a fake company, hung the technician badge on his chest, and walked to the back service entrance. "Ready?" Lucy asked quietly finally. "And we have no way back," Christian replied with a wry grin before the door slammed shut behind him. Christian introduced himself to the security guard, showing his badge and stating the reason. "I came to check a complaint about network failures. Otherwise, the salon will not be able to serve customers tomorrow." The guard, lazily flipping through some instructions, let him pass further. The corridors were in semi-darkness. The salon was already formally closed. Somewhere in the back of the room there was a flickering light, perhaps from the offices where Sophie was holding a private session. While the guard was distracted, Christian, following the scheme that he had studied in advance, penetrated the internet switchboard. He quickly connected the flash drive to one of the routers to create a bypass network. Then, without wasting a minute, he slipped into the VIP room. There he saw a massive door, but before entering, he checked the security camera in the corridor. Using a small device, he temporarily silenced her signal exactly for the required few minutes. The VIP room was luxurious. Dim lighting, soft curtains, oriental carpets. Christian quickly looked around and saw a small shelf for towels and cosmetics, where he planned to hide the camera. "Okay, come on, buddy," he muttered, carefully attaching the mini lens between the stacks of towels. He placed the microphone on the wall behind the screen, where it would definitely not be visible. Through the earpiece, he whispered, "Finished. In 3-4 minutes, I will go out and restore the signal in the corridor. You will be able to connect." On the other end of the line, Brendan listened intently. "Accepted. I'm waiting. I'll check when the camera can be activated." Already leaving the VIP room, Christian heard approaching footsteps and voices. He quickly jumped around the corner. Sophie appeared in the corridor. She was wearing a robe and slippers, and behind her was a tall, shaven-headed man, apparently one of the guards or special assistants. Sophie spoke in a hushed voice. "Make sure no one is hanging around here. We have important, guests today." Christian froze, waiting for them to pass by, and when the corridor was clear, he silently slipped back to the exit. Under the guise of a specialist who has already checked everything and is leaving, he left the building. Returning to the car, he exhaled with relief when he saw Lucy and Brendan turn their heads towards him at the same time. "Did it succeed?" they asked in one voice. Yes, now it's up to you. Check the cameras. The detective answered hoarsely, sitting down in the back seat. Brendan opened the laptop, went to the encrypted channel, and a minute later saw a broadcast in the window. A VIP room, dimly lit, but still clearly visible furniture and carpets. There was no one on the screen yet, but the microphone recorded a quiet background music apparently from the speakers in the room. "We did it," he whispered, feeling either joy or tense delight in his heart. "Great, now we wait for these nits to appear," Lucy muttered, nervously biting her lip. Thus began the main stage of their crazy operation to secretly film four lovers, where one day all the dirty details will be recorded that could lead to complete exposure both sexually and criminally. And Brendan, looking at the empty room on the broadcast, thought about how soon Stella would appear there, the woman he loved and now dreamed of destroying. The VIP room of the spa salon was in twilight. Dim lamps on the walls provided a soft, slightly flickering light. Along one of the walls, scented candles smoldered on stands, emitting a tart, slightly sweet smell. Shaggy rugs and scattered pillows lay in the center of the room, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a relaxing space than a treatment area. But the real program for visitors began when the door of the room opened and Sophie Marshall, dressed in a silk robe, looked more like a luxurious peignoir. He followed her with a confident gait. Slade Hunter, tall and muscular, wearing black sweatpants and a t-shirt that hugged his impressive figure, trailed a little behind Luke Thorne, stocky, with tattoos on his arms and, judging by the smell, bringing something strong and alcoholic in a bag. And finally Stella came in last, glancing over the decoration of the room as if assessing the situation. "Is everything ready for this evening?" They looked relaxed and confident. No one suspected that hidden high in the corner between towels and cosmetics was a tiny camera with a wide viewing angle. Hundreds of meters away, in a car in a parking lot, Brendan and Lucy were watching intently on a laptop, receiving audio and video in real time. Sophie deftly closed the door with an internal lock, then turned to the others and smiled broadly. "Sophie, well, dears, we can relax. There is no one in the salon anymore. The security understands that they are prohibited from entering here. Is everyone ready?" Stella, adjusting the harness of her tight dress, ran her hand through her hair. "Stella, looks like that's it. I hope no one will be distracted by calls today, otherwise last time Luke kept running to answer someone." Luke grinned, throwing a smoking exhale from his shoulders. Apparently, he had managed to light a cigarette. "Luke, then I had to resolve the issue in detail. Well, on my own affairs. Today, everything is okay. I just bought something more interesting." He put a bottle of expensive whiskey and a bag on a low table, from which packages of strange powders and several more bottles looked out. Slade didn't miss a moment to boast. "Slade, powders are powders, but I have something better. Yesterday, I received a new batch of material for my gym's first-grade steroids. The boys are just squealing with delight. I'll make a good profit from this." Noticing Sophie's curiosity, he winked. "Slade, believe me, baby, these things make your arms burst like the Hulk. The main thing is to have time to sell before the cops catch wind." Behind the monitor, Brendan swallowed hard as he watched the former school tormentor pour whiskey into glasses and cynically talk about something that would confirm his criminal activities. Lucy commented in a whisper. "Lucy, the creature is proud of its business. It's okay, let them chat some more." Meanwhile, in the room, Sophie sat down on a soft sofa, throwing back the flaps of her silk robe so that she exposed part of her thigh. She took a sip of whiskey and licked her lips. "Sophie, I think we'll have a drink first, and then we can move on to more pleasant things." "Really, Stella?" Stella nodded and came closer. She looked relaxed, but there was something predatory in her smile. "Stella, certainly. I really miss normal feelings, to be honest. Otherwise, at home, it's a real failure. That Brendan, the damn nerd, does nothing but sit at the computer. I need it more, and you know what I mean." Slade laughed loudly. "Slade, ha! I remember this asshole from school. I never thought that he would turn out to be your husband. Yes, baby, you wanted more and more then, didn't you? She gave him an ironic look. Stella, certainly. Well, it's not surprising that now I'm having fun with you three. With my legitimate, there's nothing to catch there. In the car, Brendan clenched his fists, feeling anger mixed with pain from her words. Lucy noticed his face turn pale and put her hand on his shoulder. Lucy, calm down, we knew she could say that. Everything is recorded, remember? On the screen, the room filled with Slade and Luke's laughter. He had already uncorked the second bottle, and Sophie leaned close to him, putting her hand under his leather jacket. Sophie, and for me, this is the whole thrill. No one should know who I give massages to and what services we add. She smiled predatorily, making it clear that her spa was just a cover for more explicit sessions from which she could profit. With every sip of alcohol and with every ambiguous hint, the situation became tense. Slade soon pulled off his tank top, showing off his ripped muscles. Slade, this is what I call real form. And don't forget how much it costs my clients. I'm not just giving them steroids, I'm selling them a whole dream of a gym. Luke unbuttoned his jacket, also revealing his toned torso with tattoos. He sat closer to Stella and Sophie. Luke, come on, your potions are crap. Better tell me how much it brings you. Slade, ha, enough to live happily. And you yourself said you also get money from these, stolen cars. Luke, I'm kind of a robber, or what? Nope. But I can resell a couple of left-handed cars. The main thing is to know the routes, and we arrange the rest through dummies. Sophie smiled, clutching the glass in her hand. Sophie, yes, you are both criminals. I'm pure, I just provide people with very exclusive procedures. She grinned, taking a sip of whiskey. Sophie, although I make a lot of money from this too, if someone starts showing off or forgets to pay, I always have spicy notes, right, Stella? Stella nodded, almost not hiding her proud satisfaction. Stella, certainly. Remember how you scared that rich man who refused to pay? I showed him a photo of him lying naked getting a massage. And that's it. He immediately threw himself at his feet and transferred the required amount. Meanwhile, they sat closer and closer to each other. Sophie put her hand on Stella's thigh, Slade put his arm around them both, and Luke, still muttering hoarsely about his cars, leaned down to kiss Stella's neck. She kissed back, smiling and sliding her hand over Luke's chest. Soon the conversation about money and fraud began to turn into outright erotic play. Sophie, Stella, Slade, and Luke were laughing and touching each other, and the doses of alcohol they took completely untied them. Sophie untied the belt of her robe, allowing the fabric to slide down and expose more of her body. Stella followed suit, pulling her tight dress over her shoulders. Slade, watching this, bit his lip. Slade, yes, girls, you are both simply gorgeous. But Stella, do you really think that your hubby can't give you what you want? Stella, what do you think? After the three of you, I'm returning to it, and it's like switching from a racing car to an old bicycle. Sorry for the comparison. The three lovers laughed together. Meanwhile, Luke deftly unfastened his belt and pulled Stella towards him. Sophie wrapped her arms around Slade's neck, and mixed moans and laughter were heard in the room. Gradually, the clothes came off. The touches became more and more explicit. Someone ran their hand into someone else's hair. Someone pulled off the last piece of clothing. In the car, Brendan swallowed the lump in his throat, trying not to look directly at the screen. Lucy also frowned, glancing at what was happening. Lucy, bastards. This is how they spend their time. They discussed how to make money from crimes, and now they are having fun. Brendan, damn, it's a good thing we're recording audio. They themselves gave away all the dirty details about steroids, blackmail, hijackings, and they continue in the same vein. On the screen, the lovers indulged in intimacy with all their might. Muffled moans were heard. Sophie flirted with Slade and Stella, and Luke moved from one to the other, not embarrassed by sharp and rough movements. After a while, the party became somewhat chaotic. Alcohol, and perhaps other substances that Luke brought with him, were doing their job. The participants were no longer embarrassed by their postures or volume, and sometimes continued snippets of conversation. Stella, as soon as Brendan suspects something, we will still make sure that he is left with nothing. I have a boutique, Sophie, be careful with the boutique, baby. If your man finds out about the loan, you may have problems. Stella, I don't care, with his brains. He won't even notice what's happening. And if anything happens, we always have. The voice dissolved in another fit of laughter and contact of bodies. Slade and Luke muttered something about going out for a minute to smoke and bringing more booze, but apparently they were going to enjoy all the delights of this night until the morning. With his laptop recording it all online, Brendan took a few moments to come to his senses. A fog of resentment clouded his mind, but he knew what they now had in their hands huge trump card. Brendan, we got everything, and their dirty secrets, and their criminal confessions, and even these perverted scenes. Lucy looked at him with eyes that mixed disgust and triumph. Lucy, they laid it all out themselves. Now you can strike. The only question is how and when we will do it. In the back seat, Christian remained calm and checked the audio recording. Christian, we have everything it takes to destroy their reputation and possibly bring them to justice. All that remains is to carefully prepare the drain and not get caught yourself. Are you ready for the next step? Brendan, clutching the steering wheel of the car, exhaled barely audibly. Yes, my goal is to crush them completely, and we will do it. Thus ended their live broadcast from the VIP room. A decisive stage lay ahead, how to use the obtained material to strike at each lover, and, in particular, at Stella, who so cynically exposed him as pitiful and powerless. The next day, Brendan and Lucy met at a small motel on the outskirts of the city, a place that the detective recommended as more or less safe for such cases. In a tiny room with a dusty air conditioner, they laid out a laptop and a hard drive on the table, where they downloaded all the files from the recording. Lucy, let's take a look. There's a lot of material here. We need to select the toughest stuff so that no one can get away with it. Brendan, well, we'll have to see how they have fun there and admit to their dirty deeds. Wait, it will be disgusting. He sighed and began to rewind the video, pausing at particularly important points. As soon as explicit scenes appeared on the screen, Lucy winced in disgust, but she couldn't stop. Listening to the audio, they chose the most revealing episodes where they sounded directly confessions or mentions of crimes. Here and there, Stella mentioned her boutique, mocking that the money could go there unfairly. Lucy, so, this moment. Yes, great. Slade literally names the names of steroids and talks about how he sells them in his gyms. Brendan, exactly, class. Here we'll insert captions like, Slade Hunter, owner of a chain of gyms, sells steroid drugs. They scrolled further until they collected the most explosive fragment, about 10 minutes of continuous video, where all four in the frame are drinking alcohol, engaging in explicit caresses, and at the same time criminally depraved chatter. Brendan loaded the files into a simple editing program he once used as a hobby. Lucy sat next to me, giving me ideas on what to include in the credits. Lucy, at the start of the video, we'll put a provocative name on it, something like Sex Entertainment for Four, Steroids, Hijacking, and Blackmail in One Bottle. Brendan, okay, and under that we'll add, starring Slade Hunter, Luke Thorne, Sophie Marshall, Stella Kelly, something like that. Loud groans, ridicule of Brendan, caustic comments about their crime. They do all this carefully left, trimming only the boring moments. Lucy, damn, it's disgusting, but let everyone see what they're doing. Brendan, yes, but not a single lawyer can say that this is a fake. There are voices, faces, and conversations. Everything is clearly visible. Late in the evening, when the video was ready, Brendan took out his second laptop, the one he used to anonymously access the network via VPN and Tor. Lucy settled down next to her, spreading a blanket on the floor. They sat with pillows around her. Lucy, should we make some noise on the internet? Such videos usually gain views quickly. Brendan, exactly. Let's upload to several adult portals. Let's attach flashy tags and descriptions, like real people, no production, scandalous exposure, and all that. They created fake accounts using name and photo generators. Then they uploaded the video, describing in the comments who these heroes are and what they do so that the public knows that these are not actors, but real individuals with a dubious reputation. They decided to make the name bold. Elite trainer, car thief mechanic, spa owner, and married businesswoman, sex, fun, and dirty secrets. Additionally, they uploaded the file to a couple of file hosting sites and posted links to popular anonymous forums. This took several hours. They wanted the video to not be easily deleted and hush up. Lucy even suggested writing short, promotional posts under the guise of random users. Guys, who has already seen this crazy video? There's some jock, a tattoo artist, a thief, and two other chicks talking about real crimes. The next morning, as soon as Brendan turned on the laptop, he saw the first results. The view count on one of the major adult portals had already exceeded several thousand. People left comments, some laughed, some were outraged by the frankness and illegal activity. Someone called it a mad scandal. Viewers tried to Google the names from the video and found the real profiles of Slade, Sophie, Luke, and Stella. Some even wrote in the comments, "Hey guys, this is a real couple from our city. I've seen advertisements for their spas and gyms. This is tough." Posts on forums were picked up by news sites. Of course, official media usually do not post links to porn sites, but hype began to grow, and rumors began to circulate on social networks. Luke, Slade, and Sophie didn't know what was happening yet. However, their friends and clients were already starting to whisper, sending links and screenshots. Towards noon, they began to appear first threats from moderators on some portals who tried to remove the video for violating privacy. But Brendan and Lucy managed to scatter it across dozens of resources. Now it was unstoppable. There was a furious discussion in the comments about who these people were, who they were hoping for, how long they could hide. Lucy, everything went to the people. These freaks are going to start panicking soon. Brendan, let it go. They had no idea what kind of dirt they left behind. Now let them sort it out themselves. Brendan and Lucy, watching the video proliferate on the internet, realized that this was just a first strike. The city station began to receive anonymous messages, links to the same video, as well as additional complaints in which there were suspicions about the steroid business, car theft, and blackmail of VIP clients. The police leadership gave the green light to check the persons appearing in the recording. After all, everyone had a named type of activity and the nature of the criminal cases. Up to this point, Slade Hunter had positioned himself as a bodybuilding idol and entered into advertising contracts with some sports brands. But the video with criminal overtones became destructive for his image. Sponsors' contracts began to be withdrawn one after another. Clients, especially family people, did not want to deal with a man who was caught in a sex scandal and accused of selling steroids. As a result, the board of directors at the head office of his own gym chain suggested Slade must voluntarily resign. Otherwise, everything will collapse. The clubs will no longer be visited, and their reputation will suffer irreparable damage. Slade, gloomy and helpless, realized that without funding, he could neither continue the empire nor fight off the police charges. His once great confidence began to crack at the seams. For Luke, things were even worse. The searches prepared by the police could happen at any moment. There were rumors that one of his friends in the criminal world gave up information just to divert suspicion from themselves. Luke felt the ground burning under his feet and more than once thought about escaping the city. However, with people on his tail to whom he owed a share from the resale of cars, he risked getting in touch with one of these partners, but they reacted aggressively. They did not want to share responsibility. The police blocked his accounts and froze the registration of new auto parts in the workshop, which deprived Luke of his livelihood. Luke began to rush around, blaming Sophie, Slade, and even Stella. They say, "One of you set everything up." Sophie's salon stopped accepting VIP clients. People were in a panic, afraid that there were cameras installed there and they might blackmail, as she did with others. Social networks were full of, "Be careful, you can get caught on a hidden video in Sophie's luxury spa." In just a couple of days, Sophie lost most of her wealthy visitors and her profits fell. The police investigation had not yet formally charged her, but rumors of extortion were already spoiling everything. Old friends from the modeling business disowned her, declaring that they didn't want to deal with a fraudster. Sophie shook with every phone call, afraid to hear about an impending search or arrest. Things were happening in the Sophie's Charm boutique chaos. Clients, having learned about Stella's participation in the group scandal, preferred to avoid visits. Some wrote angry comments on the store's page, others simply stopped responding to advertising letters. The bank, having learned about the dubious reputation of the owner, seriously took up the issue of loans and collateral for the house. The tax inspectorate also did not stand aside. The case of tax evasion and possible fictitious reporting was placed under special control. Stella had to dart between the offices of lawyers and accountants, trying to somehow protect herself. All over the city, on social networks and on forums, people heatedly discussed this for. Stella stood in the darkened living room of her almost empty house. In recent days, everything has gone wrong. The bank threatened to take away the property, the boutique's clients fled, and friends stopped answering calls. There was a ringing silence in the room, as if life itself had left these walls. A knock on the door made her jump. When she opened it, there stood in front of her Brendan, her husband, the one person Stella least expected to see right now. There was no longer the same shyness in his eyes, instead, cold determination and grim confidence. "Where did you come from?" Stella whispered, looking up at him. Brendan walked slowly into the hallway, without waiting for an invitation. He had no things with him, only some kind of folder under his arm and a stiffness in his posture that Stella had never seen before. "It's interesting to hear where. Let's put it this way. From your past, boring life that didn't suit you, right?" he hissed, entering the living room. Stella slammed the door, feeling how everything inside was turning over. Over the past few days, she had suspected that someone from her circle could be behind the leak of the video, but Brendan, she rejected this to the last. "What are you talking about? I'm not in the mood for jokes right now. My whole business is collapsing the bank." "Yes, I know about your business and your loans, which you arranged behind my back," he muttered through his teeth. "Do you have problems and you don't understand who caused them? But the answer is right under your nose." New wave of horror rolled onto Stella. She took a step towards Brendan, but stopped when she saw the chilling rage in his eyes. "What, are you saying that this is all your work?" Her voice trembled. "But how? Why did you?" "Why?" Brendan raised his voice sharply. "Are you seriously asking? Why? Maybe because I'm tired of living in deception. Because I'm tired of waking up next to a woman who, it turns out, is sleeping with 3 bastards and thinks I'm worthless." He threw a folder on the coffee table. A sheet stuck out from under the loosely covered cover, either a printout of screenshots or statements of financial transactions. Stella looked at him mechanically, but did not dare to look. "Have you, all this time, been picking dirt on me?" Stella felt her voice breaking. Her eyes moistened, but she held back her tears. "Not just for you," he clarified coldly. "I collected dirt on you all. Your friend Slade, who loved to brag about his dimensions and steroids, at Luke with his stinking carjackings, at your sweet Sophie, who blackmails clients. And of course, for you, miss, I want everything at once." Pause hung oppressively. Stella was looking for an excuse, trying to blame others, but she realized that all her arguments looked pathetic. After all, she understood, part of the truth, it's really her fault. "Listen," She began softer, trying to speak. I never wanted. Well, I wasn't happy with some things in our lives I needed. What? In large sizes? And in several at once? He interrupted with an evil grin. Well, yes, you giggled about it yourself. I heard you talking, Stella. Every time you called me a pathetic nerd, not yet knowing that I had enough intelligence for all of you to bury. Stella felt hot tears crawling down her cheeks. It was a blow to her pride, but something inside told her. He is now a completely different person, not the shy guy she knew. Is this revenge? This is all for the sake of. For what? So that you feel the same pain of humiliation as I do? Maybe. But I admit, it's much more I wanted it to y'all find themselves in the mud that they themselves had made. You didn't just run to the left, you mortgaged our house. You set me up financially. And yes, all what is happening now with your boot is the result of my actions. If you find it hard to believe, contact the bank. There I slightly edited your statements. Silence covered the room. Stella looked at her husband with round eyes of horror. The theory that he hacked her accounting system seemed absurd, but now everything fell into place. Delays in documents, errors that surfaced in recent days. But this is illegal. It's you who's the criminal. I can. She wanted to explode with anger, but there was no firm confidence in the words. Can? What, go to the police? And say that your husband took revenge on you for triple betrayal and forgery. Please go. Tell them exactly how you took out a loan without me, how you deceived them about the boutique's income. This will be very interesting for the court. Brendan spoke evenly, but inside he was shaking. He finally released everything that had accumulated over years of humiliation and resentment. Stella tossed between an attempt to justify herself and awakening repentance. I didn't want it to happen like this. Just, I've heard these simply dozens of times. You once promised that I was the main thing, that size is not important, that we will survive everything. But in reality, she used me as an ATM and a cover for her dirty desires. Nervous chuckle escaped him as if from despair. He ran his hand through his hair and looked Stella straight in the eyes. And now that's it, Stella. I didn't come to argue or ask for anything. I came to say, I achieved this. You lose the boutique, you lose this house, you lose your damn reputation. And you know what's most ironic? You yourself gave me the keys to this with your lies, your betrayals, your greed. Stella couldn't stand it and burst into tears. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she reached out to him, trying to hug him. Please, Brendan, I beg you, give me a chance. We can fix everything. I will explain everything to the bank, Late. I don't care what you explain. I do what I think is necessary. We're done. He pushed her hands away and took a step towards the door, leaving Stella in a hopeless chaos of emotions. She grabbed his sleeve. Don't you really feel sorry? You said you loved me, broke through her tears. Brendan, looking at the tear-stained face, frowned. A pain stirred in his chest, because once upon a time he really loved this woman. I loved you, he repeated bitterly, but you yourself ruined it. To me, it's a pity, until you trampled everything that kept me close to you. Now, I'm sorry, I just don't want to be your victim anymore. Then he tore the sleeve from her trembling fingers and silently left, slamming the front door. Stella, left alone, wrapped her arms around herself and, almost falling to the floor, burst into hysterical crying. Brendan stood outside the door for a few seconds, breathing as if he had run a marathon. He understood that beyond this scene were not just Stella's tears, but also the collapse of her former life. And at the same time, his past feelings, hopes, dreams, everything burned in the flames of betrayal. Several weeks have passed since Brendan's last conversation with Stella, when he revealed to her the truth about his revenge, and that it was he who was behind the leak of the scandalous video and the falsified financial statements. During this time, the city continued to discuss the dramatic story of the four lovers and the collapse of their affairs, but Brendan himself no longer took any part in this. After an emotional meeting with Stella, Brendan spent several days in a half-empty rented apartment, keeping pain and relief in his heart at the same time. He knew that his plan was complete. Slade, Luke, Sophie, and Stella had each received a blow. His own sense of justice was satisfied, and returning to his old life was pointless and unbearable. Then he made his final decision. Sell a house, or what is left of it after the pledge. Take all your savings. Start life from scratch in another place, away from the memories of past love and humiliation. Fortunately, in the legal field, Brendan managed to register his rights to part of the property, so, despite the machinations on Stella's part, he managed minimally to compensate for losses. He enlisted the help of a clear lawyer who negotiated with the bank and the inspection authorities. The share that was formerly due to Brendan was to go to him in the form of cash after the sale of the house. One gray evening, when the sky was clouded with leaden clouds, Brendan drove up in his car to the old house, where he and Stella had previously been a happy couple. In the yard, there was almost nothing to remind us of the former cozy life. The flower beds were neglected, the blinds were torn off here and there, the mailbox was filled with ridiculous advertising leaflets. He stopped, turned off the engine, and got out to walk around the yard one last time. I remembered how they planted flowers here, how they dined on the veranda and made plans for the future. But there was no smell of hope or warmth, left only a painful shadow of the past. "It's time to leave," he said to himself out loud, looking at the dimmed windows. Brendan turned around and never looked back. This was the final farewell not only to the house, but also to everything that connected him with his previous marriage. Having received his rightful share and savings from his job in it after selling the house, Brendan, without further ado, left the city. He got into the car with a suitcase in the trunk and headed west, where exactly he did not yet know. But he knew for sure that he would go where no one knew him and where he could start again. On the road, he thought about many things, about revenge, about how it changed him from the inside. Regret intertwined with relief, the pain to some extent receded, leaving space for future achievements. A month later, when Brendan settled in a modern, developing suburb of Seattle, he found a promising team launching a startup in the field of cybersecurity. He liked the idea of the project, protecting small businesses from hackers, an ironic reflection of what he himself had once dealt with. The accumulated funds, plus the share from the sold house, were enough to buy destiny in this young business and at the same time join the team as an IT specialist. Brendan officially took the job and contributed part of the money as an investment. "Not only profit is important to me, but also the product itself. I want your business to thrive, and I know how to help you protect yourself from electronic threats," he said during the interview. The founders of the startup were glad to receive a participant who was ready to bring not only finances, but also professional skills. So Brendan joined into the team, where his intelligence, systems thinking, and new character tougher, but transparent came in very handy. The last frames of his old life surfaced in his memory only occasionally. The city where Stella remained, consumed by debts and shame, Sophie, Luke, and Slade, each of whom bears his own punishment. Brendan felt that he did not want to hold on to the memories. He went through pain, took revenge, pulled himself out of the circle of humiliation. Now he faced a new future without baby Bren and the complexes with which he was once poisoned. In the evenings, after work meetings, he closed the door in a rented but cozy apartment, made coffee, sat down at his laptop, and felt that life begins to play with different colors. Nobody knew his past, and this gave him freedom to build the image of a person who achieved success thanks to his intelligence and perseverance. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.